from the Heart.
Hello everybody and welcome back to Horror from the Heart, episode 22. And my name is Josh, as always. This time, simply because what we were talking about from the last episode, as far as like haunted places and things like that, kind of got me thinking about sanatoriums. Because Waverly Hills was one of the ones that was the subject of what I was talking about kind of with haunted places. And apparently there's a lot of sanatoriums, or sanitarium, however you want to pronounce it, that are supposedly haunted. And it got me kind of thinking, it's like, because I've heard a little bit of stuff here and there about these places, but I always kind of wondered, what specific is it that some of these places had that, could possibly have made it haunted. And first off, I'm going to start off with, a Wikipedia article right here as far as what it explains what a sanitarium or sanatorium is. So through Wikipedia, it says a sanatorium, also spelled sanitarium or sanatorium, is a medical facility for long-term illness, most typically associated with the treatment of tuberculosis, or TB, or the White Plague, in the late 19th and early 20th century before the discovery of antibiotics. A distinction is sometimes made between sanitarium or the East European sanatorium, kind of health resort, as in the Battle Creek Sanitarium, and sanatorium, a hospital. Now, that's pretty much what a lot of these were starting out to be, were just facilities that treated tuberculosis. Now, how do we go from being something like that to be associated to hauntings and horrific things? Because when I talk to you guys about horror stuff, and again, that goes back into the other episodes of stuff, I want to talk about everything horror. And this is like real life horror stuff, because there was real life people who went to these places expecting help in a lot of different ways. And instead of getting that, there was, shit conditions and horrible shit that happened to them. And it's one of those things where it's like, it is a horror. It's a real life horror, such as true crime. But this is more in the medical side of things. So I'm going to talk with Waverly Hills right off the bat. Now, Waverly Hills, if you don't know what it is, it's here in the States, and it's actually located in Louisville, Kentucky. I'm not sure if they do tours there. I want to say that they do, if I remember right, but don't quote me on that one for sure. But Waverly Hills actually opened up about 1910, and it had roughly about 8,000 people who died there. And explaining that one of the articles that I'll end up linking, it says people died a bloody, excruciating death. And there was no real cure for tuberculosis, also known as the White Plague, until streptomycin was invented, which was an antibiotic. Now, there was a lot of stuff that ended up happening in Waverly Hills, and let alone a lot of the other sanatoriums. And I'm going to provide links for a few of the articles that I saw as far as like some of these horrific places, just so you guys can kind of check this stuff out. Now, as I said, with it, though, there was a lot of treatments that ended up happening. Tuberculosis was very rampant in the late 1800s, and they tried to do all sorts of stuff. Like, it was pretty much supposed to be originally, you go there, it's supposed to be mountain air, good living, all that kind of stuff, and it ended up being into other things such as, we're going to remove your lungs, because that was something that they did. Or we're going to put balloons inside your lungs and inflate them to help you breathe and stuff like that. And that was actually one of the things that they did at Waverly Hills, was put balloons into people's lungs and inflate them to hopefully alleviate the pressure and everything like that was due to tuberculosis, because tuberculosis is one of those horrible things that makes your lungs hurt, and it's painful, and yeah, it's not really all that great. Now, I did mention in the previous episode how they had what they called either a body chute or a tunnel. Now, see, the whole point of that was they would literally have this tunnel that they would take people that have already passed away down to this railroad track to place them on these railroads pretty much, or these trains, and haul the bodies off that way. And there was like thousands upon thousands of bodies that ended up getting sent down that way. And over there in Waverly Hills, not only did it do, its main focus was tuberculosis, but one of the things with sanatoriums is that a lot of them ended up treating other illnesses, whether people were mentally ill or learning deficient, what they called, and we use this term more as just a derogatory term nowadays, calling somebody an idiot, but back then it was like a medical type term. The guy's an idiot. To women who were quote unquote sex crazed or ice cold or didn't want to do their household chores type of thing, because treatment of women back in the day was absolutely deplorable. I'm not sitting there saying that everything's peachy keen nowadays. I mean, because human equality and stuff like that. But it was a lot worse than what it is nowadays. But they would do stuff like that to treat people. Now, Waverly Hills wasn't the only place that was out there that ended up having horrible, horrible stuff happen in it. There was also a place like the Danvers Lunatic Asylum, which was in Danvers, Massachusetts. Now, one of the really kind of neat things, and it's not to praise this place in any kind of way, but one of the neat things about this place was that it supposedly inspired H.P. Lovecraft for his Arkham Sanatorium. And if you get into like Batman and stuff like that, it's supposedly the inspiration for Arkham Asylum as well. And if you get into movies, it was actually the setting for Session 9, which if you haven't seen Session 9, is a slow burn movie, but is damn good. But one of the other things about Danvers also is it used to be Salem Village. And that is of like the Salem witch trials and stuff like that. So, you're not just talking ghosts. You're talking, deep spiritual witch ghosts. So I don't know if you really want to fuck around there. But that kind of goes into what I was getting at, is the factor that you have these places that have transferred from being sanatoriums to treat tuberculosis and stuff like that to asylums and mental hospitals and things like that. I mean, like I said, they literally treated people who had mental illnesses or they considered to be, learning deficient, like people that we would consider like either Down syndrome or autistic and stuff like that, where we have, care and nurture for wanting to help these kind of people out. Back in the day, it's just like, hey, screw you, we're going to stick you here, and then we're going to do a whole bunch of stupid shit to you. Why? Because, that's what we're going to do. There were actually tons of people who ended up getting lobotomized at places like this, simply because that's what they felt. A lot of these places ended up like pretty much keeping the worst records ever. Like they would have, like there was a couple of them on there that I read through where they had like thousands of patients and could only find like maybe a couple hundred records of people actually being there. Not only that, there was actually some of these places that ended up having like immigrants or people who didn't have places to go coming to these places to seek asylum, basically. And just how horrible, horrible these people were treated. Like one of these places had a, how to put it, it was a therapy, as they put it, which is not really a therapy, but they called it rotational therapy. They would literally sit somebody down in a chair, rotate them continuously, just basically spinning the chair around and round and round. And God only knows what that was actually supposed to fix. But one of the horrible things that I read on there too was one of these places had, the immigrants that would come over there seeking asylum, and they had rules. And, hey, rules are there for a reason. But they had rules for everybody, and it was like kids. Apparently, I guess they had an epidemic with kids biting people. And their whole thing was like, if a kid bit somebody or another kid, first time was a warning. Second time, they had their teeth taken out. So a lot of these places ended up having horrible things. And I keep using that word, horrible, because that's the only way I can actually think about describing some of this stuff. What gets me is that you look into the history of how some of these are, and a lot of these stayed open until the 1990s. And I'm actually kind of shocked. Like, I did not know that whatsoever, that some of these places were open until the 1990s. And I don't know if any of the, because it really doesn't explain, if any of these places actually had a lot of these kind of practices shut down and stuff before that time. Because, I mean, even if you've ever heard the term shock therapy, basically taking two metal prongs, putting them on one side of each, somebody's head and just electroshocking people was something that they did. But there are several famous ones that are out there that were, just absolutely horrible. And that's where you get a lot of these haunted stories, and you'd watch, some of the paranormal investigator shows that are out there, and people would go out there to check and see how haunted is this place because of all the shit that had happened at these places, and it kind of gets you. Kind of gets you after a while. And they would do stuff like straitjackets and stuff like that. These people would live literally in their own urine and feces, or roaming around the halls naked because they weren't given anything to dress in, or they weren't given adequate living spaces. Now, one of the ones that I kind of want to talk to you about specifically, a little bit, other than the Waverly Hills, was Athens Lunatic Asylum. Now, this place was in Athens, Ohio, and it was open from 1874 to 1993. And I'm going to read from the article that I have right here, and I'll have that linked in the description. If you're watching this on YouTube, that's where you're going to find the links at. If you're checking into anything, like if you're listening to this on Spotify or anything like that, I'm sorry, I can't post the links there. But if you go to SoundCloud or you find me on YouTube, you can find the links that I have for some of these. But the article states, as it says, in the 19th century, women who exhibited sexual desire and strong emotions were diagnosed with the medical condition hysteria. From 1968 to 1870, the formative years of the Athens Lunatic Asylum, 132 female patients were deemed insane due to similar issues, including menstruation derangements. Yeah, I don't get how that one works. The asylum's treatment for these women included freezing, shocking, kicking, and in some cases, lobotomizing said patients to rid them of their sickness. One such patient, Margaret Schilling, is said to still haunt the asylum. In an attempt to escape, Schilling had hid in the attic and ultimately died of starvation there. They say the stain of her decomposing corpse left behind on the floor can't be scrubbed clean. That's pretty crappy. I mean, not just for the factor, that whole thing of like you're supposed to be a healing facility and stuff like that, but just the kind of the derangements that we did have, and I'm using their words, derangements, that we had as far as like what we thought was hysteria in women and stuff like that. And it's very, very cruel. But article I'll link to you guys has about 10 different ones, and I have a few other articles that I'm going to post up onto there as well. And I really found it kind of interesting, and I think it falls into the world of horror in that way because of the things that just happen. Out of all the monsters out there in the world, humans, are the worst when it comes to things. So with that, though, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up right here. And I want to know what you guys think as far as, like, the whole sanatorium thing. I'm pretty sure I'm not going to get anybody who's going to say, oh, man, no, they were great and this is why we needed them and stuff like that, or the mental asylum. However you want to, say what it is. I really don't think that we're going to end up having anybody that's going to say that. But, hey, to each his own on top, that kind of stuff. I just, I wouldn't condone the whole human experimentation type of stuff. But I'm kind of curious as to what you guys think. And it's like, it gives you a damn good reason to think that these places are haunted, or, is it one of those ones where it's like these places should be torn down? Should we keep them up as like historic monuments and stuff like that? Because I even know that on some of these, they've talked about even using these as renovated places for like either apartments or other stuff like that. I'll link the articles, like I said. Check them out. Let me know your thoughts on the whole idea of the sanatorium and stuff like that. If you're listening to this on where you get your podcast at, Spotify, Apple, Google, wherever you're listening to it, leave me a review. Let me know what you think. Like, share, subscribe if you're on YouTube. Hit me down in the comments. I do reply back to comments on stuff like that. I am on Twitter. Like I said, I don't really post that much on there, but I do reply back on that kind of stuff as well. And I do have Reddit. If you want to go check anything out on Reddit, if you want to start a post, if you want to start a discussion with anything, because I would love to be able to engage with you guys and have a conversation about some of the stuff that we have going on with this. For now, thank you very much if you've made it this far into the episode. And I will see you guys in the next one.